June 19, 1944. Task Force 58, the powerful core of the U.S. Navy, was steaming roughly 200 miles west of the Mariana Islands. From the decks of the USS Enterprise, USS Lexington, USS Bunker Hill, USS Yorktown, and 11 other carriers, a massive wave of Grumman F-6F Hellcats launched to meet the approaching Japanese fleet. Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher commanded this force, 15 flat-tops carrying 905 aircraft, in a desperate attempt to halt the Japanese advance. What the Imperial Japanese naval aviators discovered that morning would fundamentally shatter their entire understanding of aerial combat. At 7:30 hours, Lieutenant Warrant Officer Seikyo Komatsu prepared for flight aboard the carrier Taiho. His morning briefing emphasized a maximum strike force against American carriers detected east of Guam, intelligence confirming 15 large flat-tops operating in 3 task groups southwest of Saipan. Komatsu was slated to fly escort for the second attack wave, an effort intended to deliver a decisive blow against the American invasion fleet. His aircraft carried a centerline drop tank, extending the fighter's range to over 1,000 nautical miles. The Japanese attack doctrine was rooted in the successful operations of 1941 and 1942, where carrier strikes achieved devastating results through coordinated attacks by experienced pilots flying superior aircraft. Commander Minoru Jinda had developed tactics maximizing the Zero's exceptional maneuverability and range, relying on its ability to outturn any enemy fighter and maintain longer combat endurance. Japanese doctrine believed a skilled pilot could dominate engagements through superior positioning regardless of numerical disadvantage. Task Force 58 represented America's most formidable carrier deployment yet. Its 15 carriers included 6 large Essex-class vessels, displacing 27,000 tons each, with reinforced flight decks designed for heavier aircraft. This design philosophy sharply contrasted with the Japanese focus on lightweight structures optimized for maximum aircraft capacity. American designers instead prioritized durability and damage control over pure numbers, accepting reduced speed for enhanced survivability. The F-6F Hellcat had entered service in late 1943 as a direct, purposeful counter to the Zero. Grumman engineers used lessons from captured Zero specimens and pilot reports to design the fighter. The Hellcat weighed roughly 12,000 pounds fully loaded, powered by a 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine, enabling a 380 miles per hour maximum speed. Crucially, it included 212 pounds of plate steel armor protecting the pilot, oil cooler, and oil tank, plus self-sealing fuel tanks to prevent catastrophic fires. Its offensive armament, 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns with 400 rounds per gun, provided firepower exceeding any Japanese fighter armament. The Japanese formation launching from the carriers Taiho, Shokaku, and Zuikiku included 128 aircraft, approaching Task Force 58 from the west at 24,000 feet. The initial absence of American aircraft suggested they had achieved tactical surprise. However, many pilots in the formation had completed an accelerated training program condensed from 3 years to just 6 months due to mounting 1943 losses, leaving them with less than 100 hours total flight time. Basic combat maneuvers received minimal attention, and carrier landing practice averaged a meager 5 successful traps before operational deployment. Lieutenant Junior Grade T-Shur Yamamoto was one of the few remaining veterans, with over 600 combat hours accumulated since 1941. His experience spanned the Dutch East Indies and Rabaul, where the Zero's reputation for invincibility was forged, though the Guadalcanal campaign had exposed its vulnerabilities to new American tactics like the thatch weave and energy-exploiting hit-and-run attacks. Yamamoto's wingman, Ensign Hiroshi Tanaka, had graduated just 10 weeks earlier with only 75 total flight hours and purely theoretical combat knowledge. Fuel shortages had forced the elimination of advanced combat training, and ammunition scarcity limited gunnery practice to static targets. Most new pilots had never fired their weapons at a moving aerial target before entering combat. This stark contrast between veterans and novices created severe tactical limitations, as experienced pilots were forced to simultaneously engage the enemy while protecting their inexperienced wingmen, significantly reducing overall formation effectiveness. Meanwhile, American radar operators aboard the USS Yorktown detected the incoming Japanese formation at 150 miles, providing a vital 20 minutes of advance warning. Fighter Director Officers, FDOs, immediately began vectoring the Combat Air Patrol, CAP, toward specific intercept coordinates using precise radar plotting. This technological advantage transformed aerial defense from reactive scrambling to a coordinated interception that guaranteed altitude and positional advantages. The FDO system represented a revolutionary command and control capability developed over 2 years of combat experience, with each carrier maintaining a Combat Information Center, CIC, where trained officers tracked all airborne contacts and linked directors with airborne fighters via radio for real-time tactical guidance throughout the engagements. This centralized control was essential, maximizing defensive efficiency by flawlessly concentrating fighters at optimal intercept points. Leading the 1st Division of VF-15 from the USS Essex, Commander David McCampbell pushed his 12 Hellcats toward the incoming raid, maintaining a tight formation and strictly following radar vectors. Each American pilot averaged over 300 hours of flight time, having completed extensive gunnery and tactical training stateside. The American training program had expanded dramatically throughout 1943, producing 10,000 new naval aviators annually. Operational Training Units, ODUs, provided 500 total hours of flight time, emphasizing deflection shooting, energy management, and coordinated team tactics against aircraft simulating enemy capabilities. The Hellcat's design philosophy fundamentally prioritized pilot survival through comprehensive protection systems. Over 200 pounds of armor plate shielded the cockpit, and the 1.5-inch laminated glass windscreen was bulletproof. Self-sealing fuel tanks used multiple rubber layers to prevent leaks and fires when punctured. This robust airframe could withstand significant battle damage. Test flights had shown the Hellcat was controllable even after absorbing multiple 20 cannon hits. This durability instilled crucial psychological confidence, assuring pilots their aircraft could survive encounters that would instantly destroy an enemy fighter. The Japanese formation encountered the first Hellcats at 09:15 hours, approximately 90 miles west of Guam. The American fighters attacked from above and behind, using their altitude advantage for high-speed diving passes. Ensign Tanaka broke left, attempting an overshoot, but the Hellcat followed with surprising agility. The American fighter's superior power allowed sustained turning at speeds where the Zero's controls became heavy and unresponsive. Multiple .50 caliber rounds struck Tanaka's aircraft, severing control cables and igniting fuel tanks. The Zero's lack of armor proved catastrophic as armor-piercing incendiary rounds penetrated the thin aluminum structure, causing Tanaka's aircraft to explode when flames reached the wing fuel tanks. This shocking destruction shattered the Japanese pilots' belief in their aircraft's superiority, and the psychological impact rippled through the formation as they watched their fighters destroyed with apparent ease. Commander McCampbell's division executed coordinated, slashing attacks against the Japanese, exploiting superior speed and firepower. The Hellcats dove from 28,000 feet, reaching 450 mph in their attack runs before zooming back to altitude. This energy-based tactical approach completely negated the Zero's maneuverability advantage at high speed. The Japanese attempted traditional turning engagements but could not force the Americans into sustained dogfights, as every Hellcat pilot maintained strict energy discipline. American pilots demonstrated remarkable teamwork, reflecting extensive multi-aircraft tactical training. The Hellcat's robust radio equipment ensured clear communications, essential for coordination. Conversely, Japanese pilots struggled with inferior radio systems that often caused them to disable their sets entirely, relying instead on hand signals. This communication breakdown compounded tactical disadvantages, causing Japanese formations to fragment under the coordinated American attacks. The first engagement concluded with severe Japanese losses. 12 Zeros fell to Hellcat guns within 8 minutes. American pilots observed traits that suggested inadequate training. Japanese fighters showed poor gunnery, with most bursts missing, and their evasive maneuvers were highly predictable. Several pilots abandoned advantageous positions out of apparent confusion. Lieutenant Alexander Vrashu, from VF-16 aboard the Lexington, intercepted a second Japanese formation of 12 aircraft, engaging with a section of 4 Hellcats and shooting down 6 planes in 8 minutes, expending only 360 rounds. This demonstrated the effectiveness of American gunnery training against the Zero's fragile structure. Short bursts from the 6.50 caliber guns produced immediate catastrophic damage. The technological disparity became starkly apparent. Hellcats absorbed multiple hits from Japanese 7.7 mm machine guns without significant damage, while American weapons destroyed Zeros with minimal ammunition. American pilots reported enemy aircraft disintegrating, often exploding after just 2 or 3 seconds of accurate shooting. The Zero's 20 mm cannons posed a theoretical threat, but their low muzzle velocity and limited ammunition reduced their practical effectiveness. Most Japanese pilots rapidly exhausted their limited 20 mm cannon ammunition through poor fire discipline, leaving them reliant only on rifle-caliber machine guns for subsequent engagements. Meanwhile, radar-directed fighter control enabled highly efficient vector management as American fighters intercepted multiple incoming waves. The fighter direction officers maintained complete tactical awareness through radar tracking and pilot reports, ensuring fresh fighters were positioned at optimal intercept points. This systematic defense successfully prevented Japanese formations from coordinating mass attacks against the carrier force. Instead, individual Japanese groups arrived piecemeal, encountering concentrated Hellcat formations positioned for maximum tactical advantage. The raiders suffered devastating, progressive attrition before ever reaching effective attack range of the American vessels. Vice Admiral Jizaburo Ozawa launched his second wave at 8:56 hours, comprising 128 aircraft from all available carriers, including 48 Zero fighters, 53 Judy dive bombers, and 27 Jill torpedo bombers, tasked with overwhelming American defenses through sheer numbers. However, the inexperienced pilots struggled severely with basic navigation, and formations fragmented during the long approach flight. Several groups became entirely lost, wandering aimlessly and consuming precious fuel reserves before locating their targets. Lieutenant Russell Reiser from VF-31 aboard the USS Cabot intercepted the second wave's leading elements just 60 miles from the task force. His division of Hellcats attacked from upsun, achieving complete tactical surprise against the enemy formation due to the Japanese pilot's failure to maintain proper lookout doctrine. Within minutes, 5 enemy aircraft spiraled toward the ocean, trailing smoke and flames from catastrophic structural damage. The surviving Japanese aircraft desperately attempted to continue their attack run, but encountered successive Hellcat formations positioned at different altitudes. Each American interception followed the same pattern: diving attacks from superior altitude, followed by zoom climbs back to high perch positions. The Hellcats maintained a decisive energy advantage throughout every engagement, dictating combat terms while denying the Japanese pilots opportunities for effective retaliation. This tactical dominance reflected superior aircraft performance combined with extensive energy management training. Japanese pilots, trained only for close-range maneuvering combat, found themselves completely unable to engage effectively at high speeds, where the Zero became dangerously unmaneuverable. The second wave's attack on Task Force 58 achieved minimal results as scattered survivors penetrated the fighter screen. Anti-aircraft fire from screening destroyers and cruisers created dense barrage patterns that further dispersed the attacking formations. The few Japanese aircraft that reached the carriers encountered concentrated defensive fire from multiple vessels firing proximity-fused shells. Only one torpedo bomber successfully launched its weapon, which the USS Indiana easily evaded through timely maneuvering. Commander McCampbell, leading VF-15's second strike, intercepted the third Japanese wave at 11 o'clock hours. His formation of 12 Hellcats engaged over 40 enemy aircraft in a running battle lasting 20 minutes. McCampbell personally destroyed 7 Japanese planes while his wingman, Lieutenant Roy Rushing, accounted for 4 additional victories. This engagement demonstrated the cumulative effect of American training advantages as experienced pilots ruthlessly exploited every enemy mistake. Japanese formations dissolved into individual aircraft maneuvering defensively, abandoning their attack mission in favor of survival against the overwhelming fighter opposition. Lieutenant Commander Kenji Suzuki observed the third wave's destruction from his damaged Zero, which was struggling back toward the Japanese fleet. His aircraft bore multiple .50 caliber holes with one elevator cable severed and the engine running roughly. The severe losses exceeded anything experienced in previous carrier battles, including Midway, where at least some aircraft had successfully attacked enemy ships. Today's operations had achieved virtually nothing while costing dozens of aircraft and irreplaceable pilots. The fundamental intelligence failure became devastatingly apparent as returning pilots reported encountering an entirely new American fighter with unprecedented performance characteristics. Previous intelligence estimates, based on the captured F-4F Wildcat, suggested American fighters remained inferior to updated Zero variants in most parameters. The Hellcat's ability to outclimb, outturn at high speed, and absorb tremendous damage contradicted every single assumption underlying Japanese tactical planning. The enemy fighter appeared purpose-built to exploit every Zero weakness while negating its traditional advantages. Aboard the Taiho, Admiral Ozawa received fragmented reports indicating catastrophic losses among all 3 attack waves. Surviving pilots described overwhelming fighter opposition, with American aircraft appearing at every altitude and direction. The coordinated defensive system successfully prevented the concentration of attacking forces while achieving disproportionate attrition. Radio intercepts suggested American losses remained minimal despite engaging superior numbers of Japanese aircraft throughout the morning's operations. Air operations officers aboard the Japanese carriers tallied the mounting casualties as aircraft failed to return from their missions. Of the 69 aircraft launched in the first wave, only 27 returned, many bearing significant battle damage. The second wave suffered even worse, with barely 1/3 of 128 aircraft surviving the American fighter gauntlet. These losses represented not just aircraft, but irreplaceable pilots whose training had required years of peacetime development. The implications extended beyond immediate tactical defeat to the strategic collapse of Japanese naval aviation capability. The returning pilots exhibited signs of severe psychological trauma. Young aviators who had graduated training just weeks earlier described terror and helplessness facing an enemy that seemed invulnerable to their attacks. Their 7.7mm machine guns appeared completely ineffective, while American .50 caliber rounds tore their aircraft apart with devastating efficiency. The myth of the Zero's invincibility shattered completely as pilots watched squadron mates destroyed without any chance for effective resistance. Veteran pilots like Yamamoto struggled to comprehend the total reversal of aerial superiority they had enjoyed throughout the war's early years. The tactical methods honed through successful campaigns across China and the Pacific simply no longer functioned against this new American fighter. Years of combat experience became meaningless when the enemy refused engagement on terms where Japanese pilots excelled. The psychological foundation of Japanese naval aviation built on perceived technical superiority and pilot skill, crumbled in a single morning's combat. Morale aboard the Japanese carriers plummeted as maintenance crews counted the empty parking spots. The flight decks, designed to operate 75 aircraft each, now held only the scattered remnants of once powerful air groups. Mechanics and armorers stood idle, the devastating human dimension of defeat sinking in as friends failed to return from what had been promised as a decisive victory. Admiral Ozawa was left contemplating the impossible implications of continuing operations with his drastically reduced air groups. He had prepared a fourth wave of 82 aircraft for launch, but reconnaissance indicated the American carriers maintained full combat capability despite 3 mass attacks. Sacrificing additional pilots against an enemy demonstrating overwhelming tactical and technical superiority seemed pointless. Yet, withdrawal meant abandoning the vital Saipan garrison and acknowledging defeat in what Japanese planners had deemed the decisive battle for Pacific supremacy. Accurate battle assessment became nearly impossible due to the critical communication breakdown between senior commanders and flying personnel. Surviving pilots provided conflicting, panicked reports, and staff officers struggled to compile coherent tactical analysis. The traditional Japanese emphasis on spiritual determination over material factors prevented an honest evaluation of American advantages. Many commanders simply refused to accept that enemy fighters could so completely dominate their naval aviators, regardless of numerical superiority. The F-6F Hellcat's dominance was rooted in comprehensive design advantages that directly addressed every aspect of aerial combat. The Pratt & Whitney R-2800 double Wasp engine produced 2,000 horsepower, nearly double the Zero's 1,130 horsepower Sakai 21 engine. This power advantage translated into superior acceleration, high-altitude performance, and a massive climb rate. The Hellcat ascended at 3,500 feet per minute compared to the Zero's 2,600 feet per minute, allowing American pilots to consistently maintain the energy advantage throughout engagements. The Hellcat's armament of 6.50 caliber Browning machine guns, supplied with an ample loadout of 400 rounds per gun, delivered devastating firepower with excellent ballistic characteristics. Each gun fired 850 rounds per minute with a muzzle velocity of 2,900 feet per second, maintaining a flat trajectory and potent hitting power at combat ranges. The total firepower exceeded 100 rounds per second of armor-piercing incendiary ammunition capable of penetrating engine blocks and igniting fuel tanks. The ammunition supply provided 30 seconds of sustained fire, allowing multiple engagement opportunities without concerns over conservation. In contrast, the Zero's armament combined two 20mm Type 99 cannons with two 7.7mm Type 97 machine guns, presenting a theoretical firepower advantage through explosive cannon shells. However, the cannon's low muzzle velocity of 2,460 feet per second created significant trajectory drop, requiring different aiming points than the machine guns. Limited ammunition of only 60 rounds per cannon forced pilots in a strict fire conservation, drastically reducing the practical rate of fire during extended engagements. The 7.7mm machine guns lacked stopping power against armored American fighters, and their 700 rounds per gun could not compensate for inadequate penetration capability. Crucially, American radar technology provided decisive tactical advantages through early warning and precise fighter direction. The SK Air Search Radar detected aircraft at 100-mile range, while the SM Height-Finding Radar determined altitude within 500-foot accuracy. This information flowed seamlessly into the Combat Information Centers, CICs, where trained officers plotted all contacts on vertical display boards. Fighter director officers then vectored defending fighters using VHF radio equipment, ensuring clear communications despite atmospheric interference. This integrated system transformed aerial defense from individual pilot initiative to a coordinated tactical operation, maximizing defensive efficiency. Japanese carriers, conversely, lacked effective radar systems, with most vessels relying solely on visual observation for air defense. The Type 21 air search radar, installed on some carriers, provided only a 60-mile detection range with poor reliability and frequent false contacts. Without height-finding capability or integrated fighter direction, Japanese combat air patrols operated independently, constrained by pre-war tactical doctrine. The absence of centralized control prevented efficient fighter allocation against multiple incoming raids and severely limited tactical flexibility. By late 1944, a new Japanese Navy pilot graduated with just 40 hours of flying time, while his American opponent had a minimum of 525 hours. American pilots benefited from extensive gunnery training, with camera guns recording accuracy during simulated combat. Formation tactics received equal emphasis, with pilots learning energy management, mutual support, and section tactics during advanced training. Operational Training Units, ODUs, provided realistic combat preparation using experienced instructors rotating from frontline squadrons. Japanese replacement pilots averaged only 100 hours total flight time, with minimal combat training before operational deployment. Fuel shortages forced reliance on ground instruction and limited flying hours in obsolete trainers. Most pilots never fired weapons at aerial targets before entering combat, and formation flying emphasized parade ground precision over tactical flexibility. The abbreviated program eliminated aerobatics, instrument flying, and night operations, all considered essential pre-war curriculum. This vast qualitative difference in pilot capability magnified the aircraft performance disparities throughout the aerial engagements. Admiral Ozawa committed his remaining 82 aircraft in the Fourth Japanese Wave, despite mounting evidence of catastrophic losses, hoping to inflict some damage before withdrawing westward. However, these aircraft encountered even more intense fighter opposition as American carriers efficiently recovered, refueled, and relaunched their combat air patrols. The systematic destruction continued with mechanical precision as Hellcats, positioned at multiple altitudes, engaged each incoming group. By 1430 hours, American search aircraft located the Japanese fleet 275 miles west-northwest of Task Force 58. Admiral Mitchell immediately launched a maximum effort strike of 216 aircraft, despite the extreme range requiring careful fuel management. This American strike included 85 Hellcat fighters, demonstrating an overwhelming offensive capability beyond pure fleet defense roles. While Japanese carriers struggled to maintain minimal defensive patrols with surviving aircraft, American carriers surged with overwhelming offensive power. The role reversal, from morning defensive success to afternoon offensive operations, showcased American operational superiority. The American strike found the Japanese carriers virtually defenseless, with only 35 operational fighters remaining from over 400 aircraft available that morning. Hellcat fighters swept aside the token opposition, while dive bombers and torpedo planes attacked without significant interference. The carrier Hyo sank after multiple torpedo hits, while Zuikaku and Chiyoda suffered severe damage from bomb strikes. Japanese anti-aircraft fire proved ineffective against the coordinated, determined attacks pressed home by experienced American pilots. The return flight occurred after sunset, creating severe navigation challenges as pilots struggled to locate their carriers in darkness. Admiral Mitchell made the unprecedented decision to illuminate his carriers despite the submarine threat, turning on searchlights and deck lights to guide returning aircraft. This calculated risk prioritized aircrew recovery over ship security, demonstrating immense confidence in their tactical position. Despite losing 80 aircraft to fuel exhaustion and night landing accidents, personnel recovery reached 85% as destroyers rescued pilots from the water. The operational tempo continued unabated as carriers prepared for dawn searches to locate the retreating Japanese fleet. Admiral Ozawa's withdrawal acknowledged complete defeat, with only 35 operational aircraft remaining from 430 embarked that morning. The Japanese fleet, which entered the battle expecting a decisive victory, retreated having accomplished virtually nothing beyond confirming American aerial supremacy. The loss ratio exceeded 10-1 in favor of American forces, and Japanese naval aviation was effectively eliminated as an offensive force. The implications extended beyond immediate tactical defeat, confirming that Japan lacked the resources to rebuild carrier air groups before American forces approached the home islands. The Battle of the Philippine Sea demonstrates that technological superiority combined with superior training can completely negate enemy tactical doctrine, regardless of determination or experience. Japanese naval aviation built its reputation on superior aircraft and extensively trained pilots, achieving decisive victories throughout 1941 to 1942. The Zero fighter dominated every opponent through exceptional maneuverability and range, establishing a psychological supremacy where Allied pilots entered combat expecting defeat. The Hellcat's introduction reversed this dynamic completely through purpose-built design, specifically countering Japanese advantages. American designers accepted weight penalties for armor and self-sealing tanks, creating an aircraft that consistently survived damage that destroyed Zeros instantly. The powerful engine provided performance margins, allowing American pilots to dictate the engagement terms and purposefully avoid situations where the Zeros excelled. The massive firepower of 6.50 caliber guns overwhelmed Japanese aircraft structures, which were designed for minimum weight rather than battle damage resistance. The American training system's vast expansion demonstrated the triumph of industrial-age warfare over craftsman tradition. While Japan struggled to train mere hundreds of replacement pilots using abbreviated 6-month programs, America was training thousands annually using a systematic curriculum developed through rigorous operational analysis. This assembly line approach to pilot production achieved consistent quality through standardized instruction and extensive flying hours, averaging over 500 hours total. Each American pilot represented an interchangeable, functional component in the naval aviation system rather than an irreplaceable individual whose loss crippled unit effectiveness. The radar-directed fighter control system exemplified technological force multiplication that extended far beyond individual aircraft capabilities. The ability to position fighters optimally before visual contact negated Japanese tactical surprise while maximizing defensive efficiency. This systematic approach transformed the carrier task forces from vulnerable targets into nearly impregnable fortresses against conventional air attack. The integration of sensors, communications, and command functions created synergistic capabilities that exceeded the sum of their individual components. Japanese naval doctrine's failure to adapt to changing circumstances proved fatal when pre-war assumptions encountered wartime reality. The emphasis on offensive operations using carrier aviation to achieve a decisive victory in a single engagement became irrelevant against an enemy that refused such terms. American forces accepted gradual attrition through sustained operations rather than seeking climactic battles for theater supremacy. This operational patience, combined with overwhelming industrial superiority, guaranteed eventual victory regardless of individual engagement outcomes. The human cost extended beyond aircraft and pilots to the institutional knowledge accumulated through years of training and combat experience. Japan's pre-war naval aviators represented an elite cadre whose skills required extensive development through rigorous selection. Their loss could not be replaced through abbreviated wartime programs that produced pilots with minimal competence. This qualitative decline became self-reinforcing, as inexperienced pilots suffered disproportionate losses, further degrading overall force effectiveness. Task Force 58 continued operations off Saipan despite the Japanese attempt to disrupt the invasion. The morning of June 20th brought renewed searches for the retreating Japanese fleet while maintaining defensive patrols against potential land-based attacks. American pilots who survived yesterday's combat described the air superiority as just like an old-time turkey shoot, giving the battle its enduring nickname. The term captures both the one-sided nature of the aerial combat and the mechanical efficiency of destroying Japanese aircraft. The final tally revealed the catastrophic scale of the Japanese defeat: 445 aircraft destroyed, 395 carrier planes, and approximately 50 land-based aircraft. American losses totaled 123 aircraft, with 80 falling to operational accidents and only 43 planes lost to Japanese fighters and anti-aircraft fire during 2 days of intense combat. The 10-to-1 exchange ratio exceeded any previous carrier battle, including Midway. More significantly, Japan lost over 400 pilots, including instructors recalled from training units, representing the last reservoir of experienced naval aviators. Admiral Ozawa's report acknowledged the effective destruction of Japanese carrier aviation as an offensive force. The surviving carriers possessed ships and aircraft, but lacked trained pilots capable of conducting effective operations. The mobile fleet that sortied expecting decisive victory returned having demonstrated only American aerial supremacy. The strategic implications became immediately apparent as American forces continued advancing toward Japan without meaningful aerial opposition from the Imperial Navy. The technological revolution in naval warfare demonstrated at the Philippine Sea influenced post-war aviation development worldwide. The integration of radar, communications, and fighter control established patterns followed by every major navy seeking carrier aviation capability. The emphasis on pilot survivability through aircraft protection and systematic training became standard practice, replacing the pre-war acceptance of attrition. The F-6F Hellcat itself continued its service through the Korean War, adapted for ground attack missions that exploited its robust construction and heavy armament. Ultimately, American industrial superiority proved decisive through a combination of quantity and quality that overwhelmed Japanese forces regardless of tactical innovation or individual courage. The ability to produce thousands of aircraft monthly while systematically training pilots created an insurmountable numerical superiority. Every American loss could be quickly replaced multiple times, whereas Japanese losses represented a permanent degradation of combat capability. Production statistics starkly revealed Japan's hopeless position. America produced 96,000 aircraft in 1944, while Japan managed only 28,000, despite total national mobilization. The Hellcat achieved the highest kill ratio of any American fighter, with 5,223 confirmed victories against 270 losses in aerial combat, an astounding 19-to-1 ratio. This success accounted for 75% of all Navy aerial victories, despite the Hellcat entering service halfway through the war. This validated the design philosophy that prioritized pilot survival and firepower over pure performance metrics. Veterans consistently praised the Hellcat's forgiving flight characteristics and its ability to absorb battle damage while maintaining combat effectiveness. Japanese naval aviation never recovered from the Marianas disaster, becoming relegated to desperate kamikaze attacks that sacrificed pilots and aircraft for minimal strategic impact. The institutional knowledge accumulated through decades of development disappeared in a single day against superior American forces. The Zero Fighter, once the symbol of Japanese aerial supremacy, became synonymous with obsolescence and vulnerability. The psychological impact extended beyond military defeat to a national recognition that spiritual determination cannot overcome material inferiority against an industrial democracy's arsenal. The Battle of the Philippine Sea represented the culmination of American naval aviation development, transforming the fleet from the disaster of Pearl Harbor through the methodical construction of overwhelming superiority. The carrier task forces Japan attacked in 1941, hoping to eliminate America's Pacific presence, returned multiplied tenfold, equipped with superior aircraft, pilots, and tactical doctrine. This transformation from desperate defense to offensive supremacy occurred through the systematic application of industrial resources, technological innovation, and operational analysis. The Hellcat embodied this evolution from a reactive response to Japanese initiative toward purposeful dominance through superior design and employment. Admiral Mitcher's after-action report emphasized the totality of the American victory, though he acknowledged the fortunate circumstances that concentrated Japanese attacks against prepared defenses. The combination of radar warning, fighter direction, and superior aircraft created perfect conditions for defensive success against conventional air attacks. However, he warned that future enemies might develop asymmetric responses, requiring continued innovation rather than reliance on proven formulas. This prescient observation anticipated the kamikaze phenomenon that emerged from Japan's desperate attempts to offset conventional inferiority. Individual pilot experiences revealed the human dimension beyond statistical abstractions. American pilots described the surreal experience of shooting down multiple enemy aircraft with minimal effort, while often feeling sympathy for opponents flying obsolete aircraft with inadequate training. Japanese survivors recounted the horror of watching squadron mates destroyed without opportunity for effective resistance against an enemy that seemed invulnerable. These personal narratives capture warfare's essential tragedy, where technological superiority translates into human suffering regardless of individual courage or determination. The Marianas Turkey Shoot entered aviation history as a definitive demonstration of American aerial supremacy achieved through systematic superiority in training, technology, and tactical doctrine. The battle proved that modern warfare rewards industrial capability and scientific advancement over warrior tradition and spiritual determination. Japan's attempt to achieve decisive victory through conventional carrier aviation ended in catastrophic defeat that eliminated their naval aviation as an effective force. The Imperial Navy, which dominated the Pacific in 1942, became incapable of meaningful offensive operations by June 1944. The strategic consequences extended beyond immediate military defeat to a fundamental reassessment of warfare's nature in the industrial age. Japan's military leadership was forced to confront the reality that their nation lacked the resources to compete with American production capability, regardless of tactical innovation. The decision to continue fighting despite the mathematical certainty of defeat reflected a cultural inability to accept surrender rather than rational strategic calculation, paving the way for the kamikaze phenomenon. Adding to the aerial defeat, the sinking of the carriers Shokaku and Taiho by American submarines on June 19th compounded the loss with irreplaceable platform destruction. Shokaku, a veteran of Pearl Harbor, succumbed to torpedoes from the USS Kavala, while Taiho, Japan's newest carrier with an armored flight deck, sank from a single torpedo hit that triggered catastrophic vapor explosions. These losses eliminated not just ships, but the institutional experience of their crews, who could not be replaced before the war's end. The technological and training advantages demonstrated during the Marianas Turkey Shoot established patterns that continued throughout the remainder of the Pacific War. American forces advanced inexorably toward Japan, while Japanese forces attempted increasingly desperate defensive measures without meaningful success. The carrier task forces that had seemed vulnerable to Japanese attack in 1941 became unstoppable instruments of American power projection by 1944. This transformation from defensive response to offensive supremacy occurred through the methodical application of industrial democracy's advantages against the limitations of a military autocracy. The battle's aftermath saw American carriers continuing operations off Saipan, while Japanese survivors retreated to anchorages beyond American aircraft range. The invasion proceeded without meaningful interference from Japanese naval aviation, which had effectively ceased to exist as an effective force. The airfields on Saipan, Tinian, and Guam soon hosted B-29 bombers that brought strategic bombing to Japan's home islands, the very outcome the carrier battle was intended to prevent. Instead, the battle confirmed the American ability to project power wherever national strategy required, regardless of Japanese opposition. Veterans of the Philippine Sea remember the morning of June 19, 1944, as the day American naval aviation achieved unquestioned supremacy over its Japanese opponents. The months of preparation, training, and technological development culminated in a few hours of aerial combat, that eliminated Japan's carrier aviation offensive capability. The Hellcat fighter proved itself as the weapon that transformed American carriers for vulnerable targets into dominant instruments of naval power. The pilots who flew these aircraft demonstrated that systematic training could produce competent aviators in quantity, overwhelming elite opponents through numerical and qualitative superiority. The lessons learned from the Marianas Turkey Shoot influenced naval aviation development for decades. As nations recognize the importance of integrating technology, training, and tactical doctrine, the emphasis on pilot survivability through aircraft protection became standard design philosophy. While radar-directed fighter control established patterns for fleet air defense, the American victory demonstrated that industrial production capacity combined with technological innovation creates military superiority that traditional military virtues cannot overcome. The battle stands as a testament to democracy's ability to mobilize resources effectively against authoritarian aggression when national survival demands total commitment. The human cost, measured in Japanese lives lost during futile attacks against superior American forces, represents warfare's essential tragedy, where courage cannot overcome material disadvantage. Young Japanese pilots who dreamed of glory defending their homeland instead died in obsolete aircraft. Overwhelmed by an enemy, they could not effectively engage. Their sacrifice achieved nothing beyond demonstrating American superiority while depleting Japan's remaining reservoir of trained aviators. The survivors' guilt experienced by pilots returning from missions where squadron mates perished became a defining characteristic of Japanese naval aviation's final period. The F-6F Hellcat's success validated the design philosophy that prioritized pilot survival and consistent performance over exceptional capability, requiring exceptional skill. Average American pilots achieved extraordinary results flying aircraft that forgave mistakes while delivering devastating firepower against fragile opponents. The Zero, which demanded perfection from its pilots while offering no margin for error, became a liability when pilots lacked extensive training and combat experience. The contrast between these design philosophies reflected deeper cultural differences about valuing human life versus achieving military objectives regardless of cost. The Battle of the Philippine Sea marked the end of carrier aviation as a balanced competition between opposing forces. American technological and training superiority created conditions where combat became execution rather than contest, with outcomes determined before the engagement began. The Japanese pilots who launched from their carriers on June 19th flew into predetermined destruction, lacking any realistic capability to achieve their objectives against prepared American defenses. The turkey shoot metaphor captured this essential imbalance, where one side held overwhelming advantages that guaranteed victory regardless of enemy actions. The strategic implications of the Marianas turkey shoot extended throughout the Pacific War's remainder, as Japan could not rebuild its carrier aviation capability before eventual defeat. The pilots lost during one morning's combat represented years of training investment that could not be replaced. The institutional knowledge accumulated through decades disappeared when experienced pilots died, without the opportunity to transfer their skills to the next generation, making the qualitative collapse irreversible. The morning of June 19th, 1944, witnessed the destruction of Japanese naval aviation as an effective military force through the systematic demonstration of American superiority. The F-6F Hellcat fighter served as the principal instrument of this victory, combining protective design, powerful armament, and superior performance in an aircraft that average pilots could employ effectively. The integration of radar warning, fighter direction, and coordinated tactics created defensive efficiency that overwhelmed Japanese attacks. The battle proves that industrial democracy's arsenal can produce military superiority through the methodical application of technological and training advantages against traditional military opponents who rely on spiritual factors to overcome material disadvantages. The Marianas turkey shoot entered history as the decisive moment when American naval aviation achieved supremacy, that continued through the Pacific War's conclusion. The Japanese carriers that once projected power throughout the Pacific became floating targets for American aircraft they could not effectively oppose. The transformation from Pearl Harbor's vulnerability to the Philippines' sea's dominance demonstrated democracy's capacity for military regeneration when facing existential threats. The battle stands as proof that freedom's arsenal, properly mobilized and directed, can defeat aggression regardless of initial advantages held by authoritarian opponents.